Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio. Join host George Smart and Frank King as they talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Show your support by reviewing us at iTunes and visiting US Modernist massive archives at usmodernist.org. And now, the former Star Search co-star to Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and Alanis Morissette. Just not at the same time. Frank King.
Yes, and I shall have you know, I am still terrified of Christina. She's a mean girl, a bad girl. We should build a wall, a beautiful modernist wall. And you know, if you made it a modernist wall, I'd kick in a little dough. This year, like every year, Palm Springs has a huge architecture event called Modernism Week, and our own George Smart was there talking with keynote speakers from what is essentially a tiki bar on steroids. Today, we join George at the Hotel Skylark talking with Ms. Modernism, Annalisa Capurro of Australia, Brooke Hodge of the Palm Springs Museum of Art, and Mark Davis, who brought an entire Albert Frey is right, guys, not Fry?
Yes.
Just testing you, good memory. Albert Frey house from New York to California. Apparently the guy's never heard the word local contractor. Earlier this year in just one truck, like that's the big accomplishment there. Support for US Modernist Radio comes from Mod Homes Realty. Love the new name. If you're having a hard time finding or selling a modernist home, Sarah Sonk of Mod Homes Realty is a wonderful, intelligent, lovely single lady who loves Bruno Mars, long walks on the beach, and pomegranate martinis. No, wait a minute. Really? That's her Tinder profile. Sorry about that. Sarah Sonk is a real estate agent, a real real estate agent who gets modern like you do. She's totally into it and has the expertise, experience, and track record to close your deal. Go to modhomesrealty.com or 919-601-7339. And by Quality Fabricators of Benson. You don't need no stinking architects when Quality Fabricators of Benson can build you one of them modernistic homes. I'm not sure why anybody would want one when you can buy a nice double for half the money, for half the cost of professionals with actual experience. I mean, how hard can it be? There's nothing that their man Gene can't do with 2x4s from the Home Depot or fix with a little Sears caulking, spackle, or some packing peanuts. Call his boss, Earl. Oh, at least he thinks he's boss. I believe his old lady is actually the boss. At 919-355-8837. Best to call him in the morning before he goes home for lunch. This week only, 20% off cantilevers and a free 6-pack of red, white, and blue. Let's go to Palm Springs and Modernism Week.
This is George Smart with US Modernist Radio, and I am poolside at the Hotel Skylark in Palm Springs, California, sitting with Annalisa Capurro from Sydney, Australia. She is an interior designer, design educator, architectural historian, speaker, writer, preservationist, mid-century modern photographer, and mid-century design aficionado. But her real claim to fame is she is known throughout the civilized planet as Ms. Modernism. Welcome, Annalisa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Modernism.
I was here with Annalisa a year ago and learned about this name and looked her up on Instagram and saw it was ms.modernism, and she had some really great photos. And I thought, I wonder if Mr. Modernism is taken. And I immediately went to Instagram and locked it in. And we have a lot of fun together.
But you did ask approval.
I did.
You did contact me and say, would that be okay? I said, I would be honoured, George. Of all the people in the world, you are the guy that should take that handle, I'm telling you, on Instagram.
What brings you to Palm Springs this time?
Okay, well, this is very exciting. Usually, as you know, I come here and actually deliver academic or, lectures. But this time it's been a bit more exciting. I've come because I had an architectural photography exhibition that just opened, 2 days ago here in Palm Springs, called Contrast and Repetition. And as you mentioned, as well as being an historian and a speaker, I take architectural photographs, and they are really an extension of everything else that I do. What I'm really about is this sort of idea of preservation via appreciation. What I've come to understand in all my work in trying to get people to understand that we need to preserve the past for future generations is you can't just tell people this is an important building because it was built at this time by an important architect. People say, well, I don't care. I spent my money on it. It's mine. I'll do what I want. But if you tell them the story and you get them excited and they get to love the building because they understand who lived there, who designed it, who built it, who died there, whatever happened there. So in all of my lectures that I do, when I'm talking about preservation, I tell stories. And then I realised that because I'm a visual person as well, being a designer, I could use my architectural photography, which I've been doing for decades, for myself mainly. I could use that as an extension of my storytelling and an extension of a way of getting people to see these buildings in a new light. Because if you photograph them and they look dramatic and they look beautiful, or they look sexy, or they look like somehow mysterious, or they look like they've just landed from out of space, whatever it is, and you emotionally connect with people, then people go, wow, maybe I shouldn't knock down my 1957 house that I just built and built that McMansion. I want to buy into that sexy lifestyle. So that's what I'm here to do this time. As well as that, I'm doing a couple of very fun talks, not academic talks, a series called Modernism with a Twist. And we're on every single night. We do 8 shows, and it's a Pecha Kucha style event. For your listeners who don't know Pecha Kucha, it's an idea.
Is it Pecha Kucha or Pachachka? I've heard it done both ways.
Well, in Australia we call it Pecha Kucha, but you've probably got the original. You probably say it like they do in Japan. But it's that very quick, a few speakers. You have a limited amount of slides, a limited amount of time. So I'm doing that here in Palm Springs with a group called Makerville. And they're a group of locals that are just, they're most amazing creative people. There's a shoe designer, there's an interior designer, there's a sculptor, etc. And they've all got together, they bought a property in the mountains, and they put on lectures, they put on, workshops of how to exactly make shoes, or shibori dyeing, or they do workshops on preservation, or they talk about futurism, or they talk about just anything and everything. It's like a collective of sort of makers that have come together. So I really help them raise money because I believe in their cause. So I'm their international guest speaker, and this year we're doing 2 programs. One's called Sexy, which I'm in, and one's called Culture. And we really look at the things about the mid-century that weren't so great. And that's why we call it Modernism with a Twist. Because everybody, in Palm Springs, it's, modernism is all so wonderful. And we go, well, back there in the 1950s, everything wasn't that great.
No, if you were black or Jewish.
Exactly, or even a woman.
Yes. And
a lot of the sexy one, I'm actually, my talk that I'm doing, I talk about advertisements. And I look back at advertisements from the 1950s, 60s and 70s and really talk about the overt misogynist nature of those, and just how extraordinary it is that feminism came out of those, times, or maybe why that is feminism emerged, because it was just so extraordinary.
On our website, we have a number of different magazines we are collecting from the U.S., and in the mid-50s, there would be ads of women spread out on bare rugs, barely clothed.
Exactly.
For brick.
Exactly. It's extraordinary. And it was brick, and then next minute it was some, linoleum, or it was a packet of cigarettes, or it was auto car accessories, or cowboy boots. So yeah, quite extraordinary. So I'm having a lot of fun this time because, as I said, usually I come here and I have a bit of a serious cause, but this time it's about having fun. It's about, educating people in a way where they're having fun and they're being entertained, and they don't really know they're being educated, but they walk away with a whole lot of knowledge and a whole lot of a new appreciation, really.
This is George Smart with US Modernist Radio, and I am here poolside with Annalisa Capurro, Ms. Modernism. Hi, Annalisa.
Welcome, George, Mr. Modernism.
And our guest today is Brooke Hodge. She is the director for architecture and design at the Palm Springs Art Museum. She is from Canada originally. She loves things Japan, right?
Right.
But she also is huge into California. She blogs for the New York Times Style magazine and has also been part of such eminent institutions as the Cooper Hewitt, the Smithsonian Design Museum, the Hammer Museum, and the Museum of Contemporary Art. And she is from my area of the country. She went to the University of Virginia School of Architecture.
That's right.
So welcome, Brooke.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell us how the Palm Springs Center for Architecture and Design is different from the museum and how these two things came about.
Well, the museum's been in existence for quite some time, and originally it was called the Palm Springs Desert Museum, and it had equal parts natural history and fine art. And eventually the natural history went to the Living Desert and Palm Desert, and the museum focused on fine art. But because Palm Springs, there's such a huge interest and passion for architecture, our former education director, Sidney Williams, led a campaign to save a 1962 bank building that was originally Santa Fe Savings on Palm Canyon, a beautiful international style glass and steel building by E. Stewart Williams. And her dream was that building could become the architecture and design center of the museum, so it would be a designated space to store, collect, exhibit architecture and design in Palm Springs. And so
those are actual pool sounds you hear in the background because we are by a pool.
That's right. Dog paddling.
Somebody's doing they're doing proper laps, I think.
So that was her dream, and with all of the ardent supporters here in town, the museum was able to fundraise to buy the building and have it restored by Marmel Radziner, the architecture firm from Los Angeles that is well known.
Very well known.
The Neutra House they did here in Palm Springs.
And so that happened. That was sort of ongoing for a little while, but in the fall of 2014, the building was completely restored and opened to the public as the Architecture and Design Center Edwards Harris Pavilion at the Palm Springs Art Museum.
And that's Beth Edwards Harris, who owned the Kaufman House.
Yes, right. She was an early and very generous supporter of the campaign to save the building, restore it, and transform it.
And what a wonderful job you guys have done. I mean, it's just extraordinary, isn't it?
We're really lucky to have it, because there isn't really, even on the West Coast, between San Francisco and Palm Springs, there isn't really a museum that has an architecture curator or a really active architecture program between San Francisco, MoMA, and Palm Springs Art Museum. So, and we're lucky that we have this beautiful building that in itself we consider it a work in our collection, just like the Frey House that also belongs to the museum.
And it becomes a destination.
Right.
People come to see the building, and then you obviously have they have the opportunity to see the exhibition.
Right.
But often people don't even know that I speak to, because I'm an outsider here too. They just go there to look at the building and then happen to stumble upon whatever the exhibition is. So you're attracting people from, they're interested in architecture as well as people that are interested in the art as well.
Yeah, so it's been great and it's also been a kind of catalyst for some of the preservation of the other buildings in that stretch of South Palm Canyon.
Now, what can people expect to see when they come to your building?
When they enter, they're greeted by, the museum has these great volunteers here, and they're greeted by one of our ambassadors who will tell them about the history of the building and about the restoration and preservation process. And then they enter what was the original main banking hall, and that's where our exhibition space is. And so we usually have 2 to 3 exhibitions a year on topics related to architecture and design. Sometimes they're historic or mid-century modern, sometimes they're contemporary. We currently have an exhibition that was originated by the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign at the Krannert Art Museum that features artists who were inspired by mid-century design, and their work, mostly sculpture, some film, kind of riffs on or critiques some of the original pieces of design.
Okay. When the Architecture and Design Museum was put together, did people realize it was something associated with the Museum of Art, or do they make the connection between the two easily?
Some people do, but it's interesting because a lot of people will, and I'm pretty new here, I have to say. I've only been in Palm Springs for 8 months.
And you came for the job?
I came here for the job. I moved here from New York, from the Cooper Hewitt, because this was just such an amazing opportunity to be involved in something that's really related to architecture and design in a community that's so passionate.
It's so into it.
And it's really the
Exactly.
only, our museum is the only museum in the Valley, the only art museum and architecture and design now. But people do sort of refer to it as the Architecture and Design Museum. And so that's a challenge that the museum is addressing, of reinforcing this idea of one museum, 3 sites. And I think one of the things that I do at the museum is not only exhibitions or programming, but I'm also involved in initiatives that relate to architecture and design. So, for example, we transformed the lobby in the main museum, and we worked with Deborah and Richard Hovel, who are great supporters of architecture and design here in Palm Springs, and the artist Jim Isserman, whose work is very kind of design-based, and he did a big floor installation with seating. And so that's the kind of other projects that I'm involved in that help to sort of give us a really strong voice in architecture and design throughout the museum in kind of all aspects, from graphics to interventions or installations or renovations of our various buildings.
Wonderful.
Now, do you get to sleep in the Frey House at all?
I have to say I did, actually.
Oh, that is like my dream. Before I die, I would love to sleep.
So I was kind of surprised that they didn't offer me that when I was interviewing for the job. But when I got the job and I came out here to look for a place to live, they put me up at the Frey House for 3 nights.
Oh,
and it was
fantastic.
Magical. It was really amazing. And just to be able to experience that, such a special place at all times of the day and night. And it was kind of like I didn't really want to leave there.
I can
Once
imagine.
I was up on the hill.
I don't want to leave. I haven't even spent the night there.
Me either.
So that was a really special experience, and it was really important actually for me to understand the house in that way, to be able to talk about it to visitors and think about, I want to transform the guest room so that it's back in more of the state it was when Albert Frey was alive, because over the years it just got sort of changed a little bit when different people lived in the house more permanently. So that's one of the projects that I'm really excited about too.
Interesting.
And are you in charge of fundraising for the Architecture and Design Center too?
I'm not in charge of it, luckily. But, at a museum, everybody is kind of expected to be involved in it and always cultivating possible donors and looking for sources of funding. So when we curate exhibitions, often through the course of our research or conversations, we'll come across people that may be potential supporters of a project. So that's how we contribute to that
I read
effort.
recently, and you may have seen this too, Annalisa, in Palos Verdes in L.A., they're raffling off a $4 million
yes.
house
I saw that
overlooks the Pacific Ocean. Just stunning view. The raffle
Wow.
tickets are $150 a piece.
Beautiful.
And you get this $4 million house if you win. Well, I'm thinking for you need to raffle off a couple of nights in the house.
That has crossed our mind, so we're
And
doing some research on
People
that.
would be
And-
falling over
Yeah.
themselves.
Falling
to
over themselves.
Give
It would
you
be
money
the
for that.
It will be the new Powerball of Palm Springs. So what's next for the Architecture and Design Center? What's the next big project you're working on?
Well, one thing that I want to do, because having come here to Palm Springs over the years from Los Angeles, I was really interested in all of the architecture here and the history of it and the history of the architects. But I also realize and believe that those architects wouldn't still be doing the same thing if they were alive today. And somebody like Albert Frey was constantly exploring new materials and experimenting and thinking about different ways of living. And so I really want to bring our programming into the 21st century, and while still building on the heritage and the legacy of the Desert Modernists, start to really be able to tell a story in Palm Springs about how people live today and what new architecture for Palm Springs and this region might be like, and what are some of the issues that we're facing, because things have changed so much. People have many more cars, appliances are bigger, so
more stuff.
The internet.
Just more stuff.
Yeah.
The internet, exactly. So that's something that I'm interested in, and also since my purview is design as well, I'm interested in working with a number of the designers and other artists who are based out in the high desert, because it's interesting to me that, like the homesteaders from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that they also find something really magical in this area that helps them to do work that's so amazing.
Because there's an extraordinary amount of work that comes out of there, isn't it? Like world-class work comes out from the high desert,
right.
And Art Desert X, which is just about to start.
Exactly. That's a new site-specific art installation exhibition that is focused on Palm Springs and the surrounding desert region, with world-class artists participating.
Well, Brooke, thank you so much for coming to talk with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you. Great to see you again.
Thank you. You too.
This is George Smart, Mr. Modernism, and Annalisa Capurro, Ms. Modernism, leaving you here from poolside at Palm Springs.
Hey, stay with us. There's more on Albert Frey's Alumina House with Mark Davis coming up. I gotta tell you, I'm on the edge of my Eames chair.
That's good. This is George Smart with US Modernist Radio. I was coming to you from Palm Springs, California at Modernism Week when we were talking with Mark Davis, but something happened. And there were all these helicopters that came over, and we really couldn't get the sound right at all. So today, we're going to be talking with Mark from the studio. Hi, Mark.
Hey, George. How you doing?
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Well, I appreciate you asking. Thank you.
Mark is involved in a lot of things, but one particularly important thing he's involved with is something called Modernism Week, which I always tell people is to architecture what the Super Bowl is to football. It is a place that you want to be to explore modern architecture every year. There's lots of lectures and films and tours and talks and the ever-popular double-decker bus tours that are out there every year, which you have a fleet of those now, right?
We have 84 tours over the course of 11 days, and each one of them are full each and every time.
How many buses is that?
4 buses, so they do two tours a day each. And some of them do a few tours down in Palm Desert. We also do an illuminated modern tour at night, which we have a program where we light up historic buildings along Palm Canyon, and with the name of the architect, the year it was built, and dramatically lit so it stands out. But the bus tours go through all the neighborhoods in Palm Springs, from the oldest, Old Las Palmas, to the newest neighborhoods, newest mid-century modern neighborhoods. And you sit on the second floor, the second deck, the top deck of the bus, so you see over the hedges and the fences. And it's just an amazing way to see Palm Springs. Even if you've lived here, people are amazed when they come back. They said, I didn't know all of this was here.
Mark first came to Palm Springs in 1996 and became a full-time resident about 2005 after a long career in the travel industry, skills of which he has put to use as treasurer of Modernism Week and also being on the board of directors since 2012. But in addition to all that, he is heading up a really cool project involving something called the Alumina House by Albert Frey. Tell us about that.
Well, it's by Albert Frey and A. Lawrence Coker. We have to give due credit to each of the architects. But Albert Frey is our patron saint, basically, you might want to call it, in Palm Springs. He lived here from 1938 until his death in 1998, and was responsible for designing over 200 buildings, everything from residences to schools to firehouses, civic buildings, hospitals. He was quite prolific. And this was his first structure that he worked with A. Lawrence Coker, who at the time was editor of the Architectural Record. He didn't concentrate on one particular style or one particular type of structure. He was prolific at pretty much anything he put his mind to. And in 1930, he worked with A. Lawrence Coker on designing the Alumina House, which was to be an exhibition house utilizing materials, off-the-shelf materials made by American industry. And in 1931, it was exhibited at the Allied Arts and Industries exhibition. And it was really a sensation because it was very sleek, international style structure, sheathed in aluminum, which gave it a whole different sort of otherworldly look compared to what buildings looked like generally in 1931.
It was the first metal prefab, right?
First metal prefab house, correct. And over 100,000 people toured the home in just 7 days. And this was during the Depression period. And then they had to pay to see this house. So it was really a sensation. And it did start to change the way of thinking for many architects within the United States, because it was this new style that was rather commonplace in Europe, but was very new to America. And so Albert Frey and A. Lawrence Coker received a lot of attention for this structure.
Most of the exhibition houses from that time got destroyed, but this one had a second life.
It did. Immediately following the exhibition, the preeminent architect Wallace K. Harrison, who worked on places such as Rockefeller Center and the UN building later on, and various other major projects around the world, actually, he purchased a house for his estate in Long Island and moved it there to use as a summer house until he was able to build a permanent summer home there on his country estate. And that's where it sat for many, many years. It was moved quite a few times on his estate. Once it was utilized for like a weekend stay, then it was added on to expand the living area. Then when he created the full summer house, he moved the Alumina to another part of the estate. Unfortunately, in doing that, he cut off about half of the house at the bottom so it would sit along inside on a hillside. So that did change it up somewhat, but there it sat for many years. When it was first designed, it was constructed within literally 7 days. They had to do it quickly for the exhibition. When it was transferred to Wallace Harrison's estate, they had dutifully marked each piece of the house in chalk. And then it was barged over across the Sound to Long Island. And unfortunately, it rained, and all the chalk marks washed off.
Oh.
They had quite a time trying to put it back together, and it never really went back together again the way it was. So quite a few panels were damaged, and they sort of, well, this will fit here, whether it does or not, we're going to put a hole in it and put it there. So it's had its share of unfortunate circumstances throughout its lifetime.
After Wallace K. Harrison had it, the house was endangered for a while, and then ended up with something called the Alumina House Foundation in 2010, which was going to relocate it as a museum, but that didn't work. What happened?
Well, the architects who basically have saved the house from demolition and also from oblivion, they and some others discovered that the house was still existent. And we have to keep in mind that most people thought this house was long gone. It was a very important house. It was featured in the 1932 Museum of Modern Art, their first ever architectural exhibition in New York. And it was also featured then in the book publication from that exhibition by H.R. Hitchcock and Philip Johnson, The International Style Architecture Since 1922, one of only 3 or 4 American structures that were featured in that book. So architects have studied this house repeatedly throughout the years, but people thought it was gone. When they discovered that it was still there, a group of people banded together to save it from destruction. They made an arrangement with the owners of the property who had sold it for development, and they were teachers or professors at the New York Institute of Technology. So they had their architectural students dismantle it piece by piece, and then over the course of probably about 5 or 6 years, slowly rebuilt Alumina on the grounds of the New York Institute of Technology. So that was around 1984 when they discovered the house, 1986 when they saved it, and then throughout the years reconstructed it on campus. The campus was then made redundant. So the New York Institute of Technology moved most of their courses into New York City. And the house sort of sat on the abandoned campus for quite a few years, and it was vandalized, and people throwing rocks through the windows and damaging the aluminum sheathing or taking pieces of it. So they decided that they had to save it once again and dismantled it, created the foundation in 1987, and the school then deeded the house to the foundation. And at that point, it was dismantled, put into a large shipping container, a 48-foot shipping container, and put in storage, where it's remained ever since.
So people have to understand that the entire house went into one shipping container, right?
It did. It was a prefab. And when the first time I looked in the back of the trailer, I thought, my God, this looks like a major big piece of IKEA flat pack packaging. Yeah. Because it was just stacked up. And it was funny. There's maybe, 6, 7, 8 Home Depot orange buckets full of nuts and bolts and washers. And they're all originally from the house, but it all compacted quite nicely into a trailer where it was safe and sound over all the years.
But no manual.
No manual at that point, but when they did dismantle it, the students and the architects, they carefully numbered each and every piece of it. And while it was...
In something other than chalk, I hope.
In something other than chalk. They also, while it was being reassembled, they created all new construction drawings of it. They also had an historic structure report done, quite extensive, probably around 150 some odd pages. Literally everything you need to know about the Luminaire House was researched and used in a historic structure report because their goal was to have it on the National Register of Historic Places. At that point, it didn't quite happen because things moved along too quickly for it to be registered, and then it was dismantled. But we have complete drawings, we have complete plans. In theory, and the architects have backed this up, in theory, once it's reassembled, it could go up quite quickly in a matter of weeks. It probably would take a bit longer than that because there are some damaged pieces and some will have to be recrafted. But the beauty of that is all of the materials are from readily accessible materials available today. So it's not like trying to create colonial window pane glass or something like that. It was industrial materials, and it was meant to be built inexpensively, and it meant to be built on sort of like an assembly line process, because the idea was to have luminaires sort of attached to each other, one right after the other, around a green common area, sort of like the English garden
yes.
feel of the 1930s. That was very utopian in feel, where the working class could have a place to live, a smart place to live, a convenient and efficient place to live, but also have a lot of green space around, which was rather, remarkable in the 1930s for anyone even to think of that.
All of this has been New York centered to this point, but how did Palm Springs get involved, and where is the house now?
Well, in 2013, I read about the plight of Luminaire, and the first thought that went through my mind was, I didn't even know it existed. That was news to me. So that part caught my eye. And the second part was that they had found a home for it. But the fact that it was designed by Albert Frey made it of interest to Modernism Week. So we asked them to come to Palm Springs. We gave them tickets and hotel and asked them to present on a Luminaire because we knew it would be of tremendous interest. However, about a month or so before they came to Modernism Week, where they thought they were going to have the house placed, that deal fell through.
That was going to be at 39th and 50th in New York City.
Yeah, in an area called Sunnyside Gardens, which is an historic district, and it is a district, a type of community like the English Garden, where they were townhouses built tightly together but around green areas. And the community was very proud of that area. However, it was a red brick, sort of faux colonial type design, little pediments over the doors and windows, whatever. It just didn't sit well with them that they were going to get a Luminaire placed in their midst. And where they wanted to place it, too, was formerly a playground, and the community was fighting to have that space back as a playground. So it didn't receive good publicity because the community fought against it. And finally, the New York Landmarks Commission said, hey, it's not going to work there, so we're not going to give permission for it to be placed there. And they had to go back to the drawing board to find a place. At that time, we said that maybe Palm Springs could be Plan B.
hey, we'll take it, right?
Yeah, they hadn't thought of that. Of course, it wasn't on the radar at all. But when they came out to Modernism Week, the presentation that they did was to a full house at the Annenberg Theater to Palm Springs Art Museum. 400 some odd people. They listened, they hung on to every word because it was fascinating to us. And afterwards, I went to the podium and asked the audience that there might be a possibility that maybe a luminaire could come to Palm Springs to be permanently displayed. And would this be of interest to everyone by show of hands? And everyone put their hands up, and the architects are like, wow. You know, we just came back from some very controversial and acrimonious type meetings where people didn't want it, and now we have a community that people really want it here. So that's what started the road to a luminaire coming to Palm Springs.
And in earlier 2017, it actually came to Palm Springs.
It did. We had our first fundraiser for a luminaire January 2015. And we raised the first fundraiser, community fundraiser, at a very exclusive community, $1,000 a ticket. We thought if we're going to go big time. And we raised $100,000. That's how much interest was there for a luminaire to come to Palm Springs. And the mayor at the time was very behind it. And the newspaper printed up front page articles about it. So the architects knew that there was interest here. And so we just continued on the road to get it to Palm Springs, but then we had a few road bumps in the fact that where we were going to place a luminaire on a piece of city property that they were going to lease to us for $1 a year, they decided was going to be part of other property they were going to buy from a developer to create a downtown park, a new downtown park. So everything had to go on hold because additional underground parking was built. It was part of a big downtown development. Public bathrooms had to be built, so we were put on the back burner for a while, which was okay because it created a site for us. It created less expense for us to have the site prepared. And also with public restrooms and everything right nearby, it was a good thing to have once a luminaire was open to the public. That project just keeps going on and on. So we decided that we're going to take a leap of faith and have a luminaire brought to Palm Springs. And we made an agreement with the architects that we will pay to have it shipped to Palm Springs. We will purchase the trailer that it's in. We will do everything needed to get it here, all the legal documents, the insurance coverage, everything like that. And if it ends up that it doesn't get built in Palm Springs, we will pay to ship it back because we were that certain that, this would work. And they were in agreement of that. And we had the trailer wrapped in super graphics, sort of like you see trucks on the highway advertising, Coors beer or whatever, with the big graphics on the trucks.
Sure.
So we had super graphics of Albert Frey, what the house looked like as it was assembled, with a big luminaire logo and our website, of course. And it was a moving billboard across the country, and we received a lot of social media attention on that. And upon arrival, we had a rather large media event at the Albert Frey designed tramway gas station in Palm Springs, which is now the visitor center. And we wanted to make sure a lot of pictures were taken of it with the mountains in the background, snow-covered mountains, so that it was very clear a luminaire was no longer in New York. It was in Palm Springs. And again, received a lot of publicity about that. And the town turned out for it. It was a centerpiece of Modernism Week. We moved the trailer to the main street of downtown, South Palm Canyon, and parked it there. This massive 48-foot trailer, and we lit it at night as though it was one of the historic buildings along Palm Canyon, and generated a lot of awareness for a luminaire.
You can see a video of the move on our website, and it's narrated by Paul Goldberger. It's a really nice little story about the history of the house and its journey across country.
Yes, in a quick condensed version, and then also on illuminaire.org. We've updated the video about the history of the house and also its move to Palm Springs, which is actually, it's quite a good little video, so it's worth seeing. And also an opportunity to donate if you would like.
If people want to donate, do they do that through the site illuminaire.org?
Illuminaire.org. Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful.
It gives a complete history of the house. It has hundreds of images. It has links to various newspaper articles or magazine articles. Tells the history. There's even a 3D walkthrough of the house, like a virtual tour of the house. That's quite interesting. So that's what we hope to do once we get permission to begin assembling it on the event space downtown.
Mark, I know you don't know this for sure, but what's your best wild guess as to when the house will be open to the public again?
Well, our fingers are crossed, and we're working on the timetable of within 2 years.
Nice.
So we know it's going to be towards the end of 2 years, but once that's done, we're ready to go. We have funds to begin the process. And between now and then, we will be raising more funds. And once we have a final agreement with the city, all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted, then we do have some large donors in the wings who are willing to help fund the restoration of Alumina. We just, until we get final contracts in place, we just didn't want to make that kind of financial commitment at first with other people's money.
Well, thank you, Mark, for sharing the story of Alumina and its epic journey across the country and its future.
Thank you.
This is George Smart with US Modernist Radio. Back to the studio.
Hey, if you'd like to travel to Palm Springs and hang out with the cool kids next February during Modernism Week, hang out with the cool kids and George, send an email to George at ncmodernist.org. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Sarah Song, the real estate agent who loves modernist houses and pomegranate martinis just as much as you do. 919-601-7339. And by the fine gentleman at Quality Fabricators of Benson. Okay, Tom, take us out.
I'm just finishing my fourth pomegranate martini myself. All right, visit usmodernist.org for more information about today's guests. US Modernist Radio is edited by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. US Modernist Radio is a production of North Carolina Modernist Houses, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. Show your support by writing a great review of us on iTunes. Again, George and Frank and I'll be back in 2 weeks for another dancing, tapping, jazzing, singing in the rain edition of US Modernist Radio. Wait, Debbie Reynolds is dead? Oh, man! Who am I going to take to the prom?